Hey, good morning, oneChurch.tv. Welcome from our kitchen to yours, or wherever you happen to be at right now. Dining room. Oh, yes. I am joined by my wife, Kim.
Good morning, everyone.
And we're sorry we can't have church this morning in person, but we love being able to hang out with you guys online. So I would encourage you, if you haven't already, go ahead and grab your phone, your Bible app, and go ahead and open onto that. And you can click on events, and you can follow along with us as we work on teaching today. It'll be fun. So.
Absolutely.
Yep. So we're in part 3 of our series, If You Only Knew. And in this series, we've been talking about asking the question, why do we hide from God and hide from others? And with that comes this whole idea of, can I be fully known and fully loved? And unfortunately, most of us, we've bought into the lie that we can't. That if somebody really, truly knew us, they wouldn't love us. They wouldn't even like us. So, with this series, we're asking the question, why we hide from God and why we hide from each other. Because we all have this natural reaction to run because we don't think people will like us. So, here's what's so interesting today. I'm talking about fully known and fully loved. Hang on, let me drink this.
Yes.
No.
The coffee cups this morning, such a great illustration of fully known and fully loved, because let me just go ahead and just throw this one right here under the bus. There's no coffee in that cup. He just wants to look all snuggly and warm today. Yep, it's Coke Zero. So he's not warming his hands on the cup as he's drinking it. There's no warming feeling filling the body as you drink it, because you want us to think that you're a coffee drinker. Yeah, look at you even slowly bringing it up.
Wait.
Yeah, gotta put your hand on it like that. Yeah. So, but really, if we fully know that there's Coke Zero in this cup, does it change our perception of who Chris is? Does it change what we think about him? Like, oh, imposter.
Is it? And honestly, most people, that's what we kind of do in life. We kind of pose.
Yeah.
We put out an idea of what people we think they might like us, and then we act that way. And as we said in week 1, that's really not a good thing, because they really don't like you anyway, because they don't really know the real you. So that's what we're going to be talking about today, is what happens when we feel like things, as we're posing, people get a little too close. We all have a tendency to run. Mm-hmm. When we feel almost, we're intimate, we're laid bare, and we feel like people can see inside of us, we have this idea that we got to run away. And that's what we're going to be talking about today, this whole idea of we run. Let me give you just an example. Let's say you're in the grocery store, and you're pushing around your buggy. By the way, when we lived in Iowa, no one called it a buggy. What did they call it?
Shopping cart.
A shopping cart. So I don't know what you call it. We call it little buggies. So as you're pushing around your buggy and you come around the aisle, let's say you see someone that possibly you have a broken relationship with. And immediately the first thing you think of is, oh my gosh, I don't need to go down this aisle. I don't need coffee that bad. I don't need chocolate that bad. I don't need frozen pizza that bad. And we have a tendency to run because the relationship is broken. And that's what we're going to be talking about today, because all of us, if you're not careful, you can live the life of a runaway. You run away from a job. You run away from friendships. You run away from jobs, friendships. You can run out of a relationship, like a marital relationship.
You can even run away from a feeling. Say you get into a situation that's uncomfortable, and it's a feeling that you felt before. Now, it may not be that relationship or that circumstance is going to turn out the same way, but because of what you felt before, you're like, I don't want to go there again. I don't want to feel that way. I don't want to feel used or betrayed or let down. And so rather than stay around to find out what's going to happen, it's just easier to run.
Absolutely. That's really good. So run away from a feeling. Some people run from addiction to addiction. and they run, whether that's addiction that's harmful, it could be alcohol, it could be drugs, whatever, or it just be diving in from one big thing to another, and they never really finish things. And all of us, if we're not careful, we can live the life of a runaway. So that's what I want to talk about today. What does that look like, and how can we stop running? Because it's only when we stop running that we can really truly be known by other people. So
running away can happen in small ways as well.
What do you mean by that?
Well, running away doesn't necessarily mean that you shut down your entire life, pack up all your belongings, and move to another location. It certainly can mean that.
Sure.
And there's probably been a time in most of our lives where, even if we've not left the city we're in, we've made a drastic change in our surroundings, and whether it's work or the people we hang out with. But sometimes you can run away just internally, where you shut down, or where you just begin to pull away from others. It's not that you don't speak to them anymore, you just kind of close off in certain areas.
Sure.
So running away doesn't always look like some big dramatic move. Running away can be, I don't want to think that, I don't want to feel that, I don't want to talk about that.
Yeah.
And so you begin to put up walls.
I got you. All right. Let me give you an example of a time, possibly in our lives, that we've ran away. So when we graduated seminary in '97 at Dallas, we went to a church, and we were there for about a year and a half and had a great time there doing ministry. But we found out the church, I was doing college ministry at the time, and they didn't want to reach the college students there. And I had the head of the deacons come up to me and says, "Chris, you're moving too fast. You can only eat the elephant one bite at a time." And you remember what I said to him? I said, "What if the elephant needs to be shot?" We weren't there a year and a half, and gosh, even though the ministry was going well, we had conflict, so we moved to a different church. And after spending about 3.5 years with that church, we ended up moving to a different church. And if you're not careful, you'll do that from job to job or church to church. Now, here's the cool thing. When we started oneChurch.tv, some of you guys may not know this, but when you're a pastor and you step into the shoes of like an already existing church, there's already baggage there, left by other pastors and other staff members, and you're stepping into a room filled with baggage. When you start a church, there is no baggage except the baggage you bring with you. And that's one of the things. Now we're 15 years into oneChurch.tv, and dealing with the baggage you bring with you is not really as fun. And some of you can relate because you've done that. You've left a job, you went into another job, and you left that job and you went into another job, all because you were running away, but really the biggest common denominator was you. Right. Exactly. All right. So let's look at the anatomy of a runaway. First, the first thing I want you to remember is that things are bad. So things are bad. Maybe you don't like your marriage, you don't like your relationships, you don't like your friendships. I was going to marry him, but I'm not sure I'm going to marry him. And I thought I was going to marry her, but I decided, no, I'm not going to do that. Maybe you like the job, but the job got messy and it got crappy. So you're like, okay, I'm just going to, things are bad. So I'm just going to leave that job. I'm going to leave that city. I am going to leave the marriage. I'm going to leave the relationship. I'm going to leave the friendship. And they go to another job, another city, another relationship. And
then they begin to say, this is so much better.
Exactly right.
And so this new wife is better than my first wife. This new job is better than my last job. Oh, this city is so much better than my last city. Everything looks perfect. Everything is comfortable. You don't have to work so hard. There's none of that awkwardness or misunderstanding because it's new.
Yeah, and so it's the honeymoon phase.
Yes. So it goes from things are bad to this is so much better.
So much better. But the problem happens if you stay there long enough, guess what? You're going to see some cracks. You're going to see some things are not all that they were cracked up to be. I thought he was great. I thought she was great. I mean, but now you're fighting. And things aren't going. The honeymoon phase is gone, right? The word honeymoon literally means sweet month, and that's about how long it lasts.
Right. What's the lifespan of the good times? Right?
The good times, exactly. Well, this is what we're going to see today. The lifespan of the good times is not running when they get bad.
Right.
It's sticking in there because things will get better.
Right.
So, but we're talking relationships. It could be the job. This job is not what I thought it was going to be. My group of friends wasn't what they just, whatever.
This town is horrible.
Exactly
I thought I was going
right.
to love it here. I can't stand this
How many times have we heard that?
A lot.
A lot. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
And here's what's so interesting. Before we left, when we were at Austin P, when we were in college, we were like, I can't wait to leave Clarksville. We left Clarksville, and you know what we ended up doing? We're like, man, I hope we can go back to Clarksville one day.
I hope we get to move back home. Right.
So anyway, so the next thing is
I'm hitting a wall.
That's right.
So that's where you really, the full effect of, what have I done?
Mm-hmm.
Where am I at? Look at these relationships, look at my job, look at the town. Basically, it's not just bad, it's probably even worse than it was before
you
because
ran.
Because you've run, but you haven't really addressed the problem. You haven't really addressed the issue. And so now that you're seeing cracks and you've hit a wall, now what do I do? And so do I dig in and do the hard work? Do I ask the hard questions about myself, my life, my relationships, what I'm doing? Or do we
run?
Right.
And honestly, most of us, we have a tendency to run. So you just run to the new girl, you run to the new guy, you run to the new relationship, you run to the new job, you run to the new city, you run to the new school, whatever that looks like. You just run. And what you will see is nothing changes.
Right.
I'll give you an example. We always have this idea that next time will be better than last time. And it reminds me of a person. I can't mention his name because they may be watching. But man, this person was so not happy being in the military. And they thought, you know what? I want to get out of the military. And they had a dream job in mind. And they worked hard in the dream job. They actually got the dream job. They was working in this dream job, and they eventually quit this dream job because they were going to get fired because they hated it. And this person, I remember talking to this individual, they said, well, the people in the Army, the people over me were just idiots. And the people in my new job, this dream job of mine, were just idiots. And then he went to another job, and guess what? Everybody above him was just idiots. And after a while, you have to start addressing the fact that the common denominator is you, because there is an alternative for running. And what we're going to be looking at two passages of scripture for the rest of the time we're hanging out with you guys. One is going to be in Psalms, the other one is going to be in Romans. And we're going to be looking at Psalm 32. We're going to be reading David's journal. And David is in a very tough situation. And I love how David writes because it's so honest. It's so authentic. So we're just kind of going to creep in and read David's journal today. And we're going to be starting in Psalm 32, verse 3.
And this is what he says. When I refused, notice that word first off, when I refused to confess my sin, my body wasted away and I groaned all day long. Now, let's take that apart just a little bit. So first of all, notice the word refused. And now, how do you feel when you've been refused something?
Not good.
Yeah. Or how do you feel when you are the one refusing?
Sure.
If you've been refused, you probably feel rejected, maybe hurt. Mm-hmm. If you're the one refusing, you've got this deep-seated, wall or block or stubbornness even within you that's like, oh no.
Sure.
But notice that what he's refusing to do is to confess sin, to confess the wrong stuff, the stuff that makes life not so great. So I'm going to refuse to talk about the stuff that is not so great. And so what begins to happen? My body wasted away and I groaned all day long. To me, this sounds like a classic case of stuff it down, right?
Yeah.
Let me stuff it down. I don't want to talk about it, but then we all know when we have a case of stuff it down, it really just eats us up from the inside out. We're miserable. And even though we might think, oh, I've just put it away, there's nothing I can do about it, oh, it creeps in. It may creep in irritability toward your spouse or toward your kids, or maybe you're not performing as well as you should in your job. You get lazy, you get unmotivated, you get bitter, you get snappy, you get snippy, right? I never do that. You're supposed to say I never do that.
She never does that.
Right? Yes. You never do that.
And it also, I never do. I do. And it also has a tendency to affect us physically.
Right.
And that's kind of this song. We can't sleep at night. You lose weight. People look at you and they're like, are you okay? You seem kind of sickly. You seem tired. And when you stuff it down, like you said, it's kind of like a cancer eating inside of you. It always affects us physically, and it also always spills over into other relationships. Now, the psalmist says that's exactly where he's at. He says, it says it's a sin. Now, we don't call sin today, unfortunately. We call it an addiction. We call it making a choice. We call it something else. But think about this. What if sin is that thing in your marriage that's tearing everything apart? What if that really does describe it? What if it's that thing that's making it difficult for you to have a good, healthy friendship with somebody else? Because you're just so prideful. It's always about you. You're narcissistic. Maybe it's one of those things that creeps into your parenting, and it's always about you, and you don't listen to them. And I mean, we don't call it sin, but the Bible calls it sin. Mm-hmm. So let's finish, start in verse 3 and keep on going to verse 4, if you would mind reading it.
When I refused to confess my sin, my body wasted away. So when I stuffed it down, didn't talk about it, I felt it physically. And I groaned all day long. Groan, complain, whatever you want to call it. Day and night, your hand of discipline was heavy on me. My strength evaporated like water in the summer heat. Now, here's a question. Can sin make you sick?
Can sin make you sick? Well, I believe it could. And I believe it does, because some of you, I don't know if you believe that or not, but let me just give you some statistics. Sometimes it's a hard word for me to say. From the American Medical Association and the Mayo Clinic. And we're going to see that there is a definite connection between the mind and the body. Mm-hmm. All right. So, and I think we know this. I mean, some of you were like, if you had a project to do at school, right, and you totally forgot about it, right, and it's like that day, you say something like this: I'm sick to my stomach, right? Or let's say you have to stand in front of somebody and you have to give a presentation, right? I mean, maybe that kind of makes you nauseous.
Mm-hmm. You get sweaty.
Absolutely.
Your hands get all clammy.
Exactly right.
Your breath, your breathing is shallow. Mm-hmm. Your heart is beating faster.
You get butterflies in your stomach,
yes,
right?
So between your stomach and your breath and your heartbeat, or maybe your brain, it's just like, ooh. It's all crazy.
So we know that. So let me just give you some stats, and this is from the AMA and the Mayo Clinic. 75 to 90% of all visits to doctor's offices are stress-related. Isn't that interesting? The majority of visits to doctor's office are stress-related, and our white blood cell count gets low. Stress harms our immune system. The symptoms of stress can actually be profoundly physical. In fact, a lot of people, when they go into an ER thinking they're having a heart attack, they're actually having a panic attack.
Right.
Exactly right.
Right. So, heart palpitations, high blood pressure. And the other statistic is that about $300 billion is lost annually in productivity because of people dealing with stress-related issues. So whether that's a migraine headache, once again, it can be digestive issues. Something else that's interesting, a lot of times are autoimmune diseases, like Crohn's disease or thyroid disease, things like that, are not even from an outside source, but can just be from stress within the body. The body begins to react and even attack itself because of this feeling of stress. And it's like, I don't know what that is, but we've got to get it out.
Sure.
And so some sicknesses and illnesses within the body are even exacerbated by stress.
Sure.
And then the body is like, gotta go, gotta get rid of this.
Yep. The lifetime prevalence of an emotional disorder is due to chronic, untreated stress reactions more than 50% of the time. Again, that's from the EMA. You see, when we get stressed, we're either because we work too long, or maybe because we've done something that we have regret. Again, the Bible calls that sin, whatever that looks like. You think, you know what? And if you're a runner, you think, I'm not going to deal with it. I'm just going to move on. I'm going to get out of this situation. I'm going to get to some place where things get better. But the problem is, it's kind of like Pigpen in Peanuts. You remember Pigpen? Anytime he went somewhere, what followed him?
His little cloud.
His little cloud.
Yeah.
And honestly, all of us have little clouds.
Yeah. And as you were saying that, it made me think of something, because when you said, if you're a runner, if you tend to run, sometimes I think we can justify running because we think to ourselves, well, I don't really want to cause an issue for that person or that situation. So rather than bring it up and have that person feel bad or make a situation worse, I'll just move out of the way. But what we don't realize is that we've got issues in our tissues. We're carrying around that anger, that sadness, that regret, that bitterness, whatever that looks like. And so we're just taking it with us wherever we go.
Yep.
Just because we chose not to deal with it in the present with a person or in a situation, it's still in us. So wherever we go, just like the little cloud, we're taking it with us as we go.
And see, what's so interesting about that, like with the Pigpen, like you said, the issues in our tissues, us running away doesn't fix the issue because the cloud follows us. What fixes the issue is dealing with our sin. It's the soap.
Right.
It's getting clean. And that's what we're going to be looking at with the rest of this. Because despite the evidence, the most common response to sin is usually deny it and to run away. That it's my ex's problem, it's my girlfriend's problem, it's my husband's problem, it's my boss's problem, it's my friend's problem, whatever it is. So, but again, the common denominator, it's me. It's you. Well, let's be honest. It's you. It's
really
you. All right. This is what it says. Psalm, that was really cheesy. I apologize. Psalm 32:5. Finally, I confessed all of my sins to you and stopped trying to hide my guilt. He stopped the cycle. We talked about this in week 1. We blame people, and then we have denial and fear, and then we accuse, and then we justify ourselves. We have to stop that. He says, I confessed all of my sins. And then look at what it says in verse 5. I said to myself, I will confess my rebellion to the Lord. So both those verses together, I confess my what?
All my sins.
Yep. And stop
trying to hide.
Yep.
Yes.
And that's what we're talking about in this series. We have to stop hiding. We have to come clean. And then I confessed my rebellion to the Lord. Guys, some of us, and I'm going to talk just to the guys right now, some of you really need some counseling. But for most guys, we have a tendency to push back on that because we think, you know what, that admits weakness. But again, that admits strength. You need to have somebody kind of help unpack things. I got a great friend. His name is Bob. And anytime I have any Jeep issues, I can take my Jeep to Bob and he will, I'll help him fix it. And let's be honest, I'm sitting there watching. I'm doing nothing. All right. So, but Bob is an expert. And you see, that's how a lot of us are. When we have issues with our vehicles, many times we can't do it ourselves. Let's take it to an expert. It doesn't mean you shouldn't be driving anymore. You shouldn't drive that vehicle. It just means you need somebody who knows a little bit more about tinkering than you do. And honestly, that's what a counselor is. Look at what it says in verse 5. You want to read that right down here? I
said to myself, I will confess my rebellion to the Lord. And so here's the thing. David realizes I messed up. And here comes the lightning bolt, I better get myself together or what, am I going to get zapped?
Yep.
Exactly. Get your act
because
together.
I think that's what most of us expect.
Sure. We have this feeling that God's out to get me, or if I don't do something right, he's going to come after me. But look what it says. It says, I confessed. And then what happens? It says, and you forgave me.
Wow.
It doesn't say that God chased him down and was like, oh, I'm never going to let you forget this. Oh, I'm keeping a list and you better watch out. Out of all the things that David had dealt with, the sin that he had not confessed, the moaning, the groaning, feeling it physically, finally when he comes clean, when he confesses, God says, okay, I forgive you. Now let's start over again. And I don't know what you think about God. I don't know what you think about his character, about what you think about who he is. But ultimately, when we find ourselves in that cycle, God is who we're running from.
That's right.
Because he is the one that helps us understand, whoop, this isn't quite right in your life. Whoop, I've got the guardrails up. Get back in the middle here. Stay on track. Don't look to the left. Don't look to the right. And notice this final phrase in Psalm 32:5. You forgave me, and now what's the result of that forgiveness?
All my guilt is gone. Isn't that what we want? I mean, that really is what we want, but we can't get to that point unless we deal with our own murky cloud.
Right.
Unless we confess and he forgives us. I mean, that's kind of Jesus getting the soap out and getting us all clean. And look what it says in verse 6. Therefore, let all the godly pray to you. Now, whether you're a church person or not, maybe you're kind of scrolling through YouTube or Facebook and you just kind of, maybe church isn't your thing. That's okay. But what he's saying here is he wants everybody to pray. Let everyone pray while there's still time, that they may not drown in the floodwaters of judgment. And look at what he says. For you are my, what's that next word?
Hiding place.
Hiding place. Look what happened to hiding. You see, we went from hiding from God to hiding in God. I love that. You protect me from trouble. You surround me with songs of victory.
Absolutely. And so he's saying that the amazing thing about confessing our sin and being honest is that there's healing on the other side. Have you ever been in that place where there's something you're just dreading dealing with? Like all those issues we talked about. Your stomach hurts, you've got a headache, you can't get your thoughts straight, you can't sleep at night. And then when you go to address the issue, it turns out not to be as big of a deal, perhaps, as you've made it in your mind or as you felt in your emotions.
Sure.
Because maybe, say it's in a relationship. You go to that person and you say, hey, I know this has been going on and we haven't been getting along. And the person says, yeah, I completely agree. Can we just start over? And you're just like, you've gone in expecting some sort of major conflict or argument, and then it's just relief. It's like you can exhale.
Absolutely. This is kind of what Carlo talked about last week. You know, and if you missed last week, you really need to go back and watch. But us as a staff, we've been kind of churning with some things, and some have been worrying, and we've been concerned about, okay, when is this going to happen? God, when are you going to make this happen? And we were rejoiced last week that God made some amazing things happen in the life of our church, but it still took a toll on us as a staff. Carlo talked about the toll it took on him. It took a toll on us as well, all of us. So, but looking back on the other side of it, man, there's like a burden that's lifted from you, isn't it?
Yeah.
Absolutely.
It's just that sense of, I don't have to carry that anymore. And of course, we know that the character of God is what we read in Psalm 32:7. You are my hiding place. You protect me from trouble. You surround me with songs of victory. But how often does it take us to really get to that place? Because we're maybe trying to figure it out on our own, or maybe God hasn't even entered our mind in whatever situation. Like, this isn't something I would even take to God. But when we start with him, when our hiding place is in him, honestly, there are some places that we'll be protected from. There'll be some things that won't ever even come up when we're trying to do it on our own, because it says, you protect me from trouble. So when we stay hidden in him, when we stay close to him, when we stay focused on him, some of those things of trouble and worry and frustration never even crop up in our lives, because we've hidden ourselves in him to begin with.
Absolutely.
He's protected us from the beginning. And so the amazing thing about being honest and being real is that there's healing on the other side when we have stepped out on our own. But when we hide in him to begin with, there's just some things we won't ever even have to struggle or face, because he protects us through it.
So you have an option here, and your option is to stop running. Stop running from that relationship. Stop running from that job. Stop running from those friendships. Stop running from you experiencing those feelings, whatever that looks like. And it's going to take courage for you to stand up and not run. You know, one of the things I learned a long time ago is anytime you start running from giants, you never stop running. In fact, if I can do a movie quote here, in Captain America, he talks about when you retreat, he says, why didn't you ever retreat when you got beat up? And he says, it's because you will never stop retreating. You have to stand your ground. It takes courage and to not be afraid. You know what? I'm gonna stand my ground. So with this last passage of scripture we're going to be looking at, this is Romans chapter 5. He simply says, don't be afraid, because look at what it says in Romans 5:6. When we were utterly helpless. Some of you feel that way right now. You're just utterly helpless. Like you are at the end of your rope. You don't know what you can do. You don't know how you can fix it. I mean, things have just gotten so bad, and your natural tendency is to bolt. I mean, he says, when you were utterly helpless, look at this. Christ came at just the right time. I love that. You know, so many world religions are all about humanity's quest for God. That's how Buddhism is, and that's how Islam is, and so many. I mean, it's their quest for God, but that's not Christianity. Christianity, it's God's quest for us. It's where He shows up, and He's looking for us even when we're not looking for Him. I love that. God coming to us. God searching for us. And it says He came for you and me. Verse 6. Christ came at just the right time and died for us sinners. Verse 7.
Now, most people would not be willing to die for an upright person, though someone might perhaps be willing to die for a person who is especially good. But God showed us His great love for us by sending Christ to die for us while we were still sinners. So once again, it pulls it back to the human scale of, well, you know, as humans, we might be willing to do this for someone that we think is especially good, or someone who in our eyes or in culture's eyes is worthy or has made a difference. That's what Romans 5:7 is saying. But then look at Romans 5:8. But, God's big but right there. Whenever we see that word, we have to say, what's it there for? What are we contrasting here? But God showed His great love. So not out of fear, not out of bitterness, not out of anger, but God showed His great love for us by sending Christ. It wasn't a matter of, you people are driving me crazy, and so here comes the great discipline, like we talked about earlier. It was out of love. That's right. Out of his great affection for you and for me. It's not that He's like, you've driven me crazy and now it's time for you to be sent to your room and I'm done with this. No, out of the love, for the love of Christ, to die for us while we're still sinners. Every one of us is in that situation. That's right. If you're wondering, like, is so-and-so better than me? Or how do I compare to this person? Are they better than me? No, we're all in the same boat. None of us is better than another. None of us has all the answers. None of us is all great and someone else all terrible. And so God saw that and was like, you know, everybody's dealing with these issues. Everybody's got sin in their life. And the only way for me to fix this is to send Jesus.
That's right. He picks it up in Romans 5:9. And since, it's the consequences, since we've been made right. Now, let me tell you, that's not when I got my life right. That's not when I got all of my junk together, then I come to God. No, that's not what it's saying. He says He came to us first. And because He came to us and initiated the relationship, then we have been made right. I'm going to keep on reading. And since we've been made right in God's sight by the blood of Christ. And I love that, been made right. That's called the divine passive. And what I mean by that is we don't make our own selves right. God makes us right. The divine passive. We don't do it. He does it for us. We've been made right in God's sight by the blood of Christ. That's how we're made right. It's not by going to church. It's not by giving. It's not by serving. It's not by trying to live by the 10 Commandments or any of that stuff. It's because God's sent His Son Jesus to die on the cross for us. He will certainly save us from God's condemnation. Verse 10, for since our friendship with God, look at this claim, you and I are now friends with God. I love that. Since our friendship with God was restored, not by us trying harder, but by the death of His Son while we were still enemies, we will certainly be saved through the life of His Son.
And that's what a relationship with Jesus looks like. We basically come to the end of ourselves, we stop running, and we realize I'm never going to have all the answers.
That's right.
I'm never going to be able to fix this
That's
by
right.
cleaning up my act or by looking how the world says I should look or by jumping through hoops or by my achievements or my striving. What we realize is that we can never do it on our own.
That's right.
It's by the life and death of Jesus that he restores us and we come into relationship with him. That's where life begins for us. So now that we have received, we're in Romans chapter 5, 10 and 11, now that we have received this wonderful new relationship with God because of the Lord Jesus, he has made us friends of God. Now, I don't know about you, but I like having a good friend.
Yes.
There is nothing like a good friend.
Because they stick with you through thick and thin.
Yes. I mean, think of it. A friend is someone you run to when you need to talk to somebody.
That's right.
A friend is someone that you laugh with.
Yeah.
A friend is someone that you trust. And notice that this says that we have been made friends of God. We can trust God. We can go to God when we're upset. We can laugh with God.
Yes.
We can be thankful with him.
I'm reminded of that proverb. It says, there is a friend that will stick closer than a brother. And gosh, that is Jesus Christ. You're
Right.
exactly right. Our big idea today is simply this. While you were running away from God, God was running to you. He was running to you. It's not that he was angry with you. He's not. He was running to you, wanting to have a relationship with you. So let's dismantle this lie once and for all, okay? This lie that I can't be completely known and completely loved. Let me tell you, that is a lie, because your Heavenly Father created you. He completely knows you, and he completely loves you. I mean, he knows you from the ground up. So what are you going to do? How are we going to take this message and apply it? The first way, as I would simply say, is
Stop running.
Stop running.
Surrender.
Stop running. Absolutely.
Surrender.
Stop running and say, you know what? Even though the whole fight or flight, I'm not going to flight. I'm going to fight that flight instinct, and I'm going to stay here. And when you do that, we have to surrender. We have to leave things open and open-handed and say, God, what are some things in me that you need to change? Because if I am the common denominator, we need to confess our sin. We need to come clean with God, and we need to come clean with others. Sometimes it's just things of relationships have been ruined in your life because you have been the ones ruining them. Go to that person and confess. And here's what I know. Our Heavenly Father, he is in the business of reconciling relationships. He is in the business of restoring things and making things better. But you have to confess. You have to get it all out in the open. You can't hide, but you have to bring it to him so that he can heal it.
Absolutely. Because when we come to that place of recognizing I can't do it on my own, what we're saying is that God is not just a part of my life, God is my life.
That's right.
And when we filter everything that we do, all the thoughts that we have, all our actions, when we filter it through what his plan for relationship looks like, what his plan for our life looks like, then it takes us a whole different direction. We're not running away from God, we're running to him.
Absolutely.
Knowing that he has been running toward us all along.
All right, so we're kind of close to the end here, but I am on Facebook now, and I'm just kind of looking through this. Do any of you guys have maybe some questions about what we talked about today? Anything that we can be able to kind of talk through? Maybe you're like, hey, can you talk a little bit about that more? So what's some of the things that we talked about? And we're just going to give you a little bit of time. By the way, I see you, Miss Janice. Found my friend. So good seeing you. Hey, Joe. Nice to see you as well. And Sabine. So good seeing you guys.
Bobby Meeks.
Bobby Meeks. Hey, Bobby. How you doing? And CJ. Good seeing you guys. What's some things that maybe stood out to you with our teaching today that you're like, man, that... Maybe that you don't struggle with something, and then we'll talk about something that you do struggle with. Like maybe we said, yeah, that's just not me. I mean, do you have that?
Oh, I'm much quicker to focus on what I do identify with.
Okay.
Yeah, I do that. If I get into a relationship and like, for example, loyalty is a big thing to me. I'm a very loyal person, and I'm loyal to those that I have friendships with and relationships with. And so sometimes if I feel like someone doesn't give that same loyalty back, or that I don't have that same importance, I'm just like, okay, I'll just back out. Because I've had that backfire before where I felt like I stayed too long. I kept trying too hard in a relationship or in a situation, and I'm sometimes I can be slow to catch on. I don't know about you.
I think we all are.
Sometimes and it'll come, like, I'll realize, like, oh my gosh, no, this person's been trying to drop clues all along, like, Kim, get out of my way, or I'm not really cool hanging with you, or whatever that looks like. So I know I feel like I'm being kind of nebulous, but overall, I don't like the feeling of feeling like I'm giving 100%, and
somebody else is giving 60%.
Yes, exactly. Yes. And that makes me run.
So now let's talk about that. All right. And by the way, I see the Bents. Hey, you guys, and Buenos dias, mi amigo. That is from Carlos.
Nice.
I did not know I could speak Spanish. So loyalty is a big thing for you, and you don't feel like somebody is being loyal as much to you. You have a tendency to back out.
I'll run. Yeah.
So, and honestly, one of those things that, and I get that because of some of the past things that you and I have been through. But one of the things that might help is, okay, instead of running, is having that conversation before you run. Having to say, listen, here's what I feel like about our relationship, that I am all in, and it doesn't feel like you are. And I just want to move on, but.
Well, those are hard things to say.
They are.
I mean, it's easy to say that in the moment, to be like, well, I feel like I'm giving 100%, but I feel like you're maybe giving not that much. Because in the end, this is how it fleshes out for me. If somebody doesn't want to be in that place, and if somebody doesn't want to spend that time or develop that relationship, then why do I want to stay? Right? I mean, I want it to be a two-way street.
But here's the problem. If you don't confront the relationship, it's going to die because you'll run, you mentioned. But if you confront, you're right, it may not get any better, but it actually might. There may be that level of depth and intimacy. And that's what you're risking. But think about it. If you don't risk that, the relationship's going to die anyway, right?
I mean, it's true. But I think when you're in the moment and when you're dealing with those physical characteristics that we talked about, when you can't sleep, when you're having those imaginary conversations in the mirror, like, oh, I would say this, and then they would say that, and I might say this, and I'd be like, when you're doing those types of things. That keep you, it keeps us stuck.
Yeah.
And so, and really, I think that's kind of the heart of where running comes from. Like, can I be truly known and truly loved? If I come to somebody and say, hey, I feel like I'm giving all I've got to this relationship, but you're not, or maybe I feel like you're not, is that person going to love me still, even once I share that? I think it's that fear on the very front side of that.
You're right.
That makes us run. Because you're right. If you come and have a conversation, it may be, oh no, I love you. I think you're great. I love our friendship.
Or it may be, there's something going on in my life.
Yes, true.
That you don't know that I'm struggling with. And again, the intimacy will grow deeper if you have the conversation.
It's true.
But I'm afraid if we don't, again, our tendency will be to run.
Yeah,
so
absolutely.
By the way, Tamesa, good seeing you on here. Tamesa and Jake Elliott, good seeing you as well. So, any other questions you guys might have about the kind? Now, I kind of put you on the hot seat.
You totally put me. He threw me under the bus. I don't know if y'all just saw that. This moment of vulnerability brought to you
by Chris
Edmondson.
No, this moment of Kim's vulnerability brought to you by Chris. So, you know me and you know my mess. I mean, what's some things that I struggle with?
I'm not going to do that to you. You just, if you choose to share, you go right ahead.
What? I mean, and there's somebody on our staff, I won't call this individual out, but her and I are, not you, but this other person and I, we're not very good at conflict. And I have a tendency, especially in my past, to run from conflict. So I have that running as well, that I'm like, okay, things get too tough, so I'm just going to bolt. And again, what I told you about, hey, this is the best medicine you should take, I got to take myself, that conflict is not always bad. Because conflict, in a lot of ways, even though it can break up that ground, so that good things can grow. So risk the relationship. Because I'm afraid if you don't have that hard conversation, the relationship's eventually going to die anyway. Because somebody will run.
And I want to be clear, the issue is also not just about conflict resolution. Because sometimes there are things in our own lives, there are patterns within us that we really have to take a deep dive into. Now, having a conversation with someone may help bring that to light.
Yeah.
But sometimes there are just some things in our own heart and in our own life. And if our relationship with God is not where it's really strong and thriving, that's probably where we're going to find that more.
Absolutely.
So the challenge is stay close to God.
That's right.
Keep yourself in His Word.
That's right.
If you need some life advice, go to the book of Proverbs. Some great advice in there for dealing with relationships, for dealing with managing your money, for dealing with marriage, for dealing with kids, all types of things. Our wisest counsel will always be God's word.
Absolutely.
Always.
Now, before we get off here, Tamara, she commented on this. She says, I completely agree about loyalty. Sometimes I don't take a step back to realize my loyalty doesn't define others, and they are just as deserving of being understood about a situation as I am.
Yeah.
And sometimes I don't give the opportunity for others to explain or to help me understand the situation from their point of view before I just give up and run. That is
excellent.
It's really good.
Excellent.
Very good. And she says, he ends, vulnerable, I don't like to feel it. But here's the thing. You say, I don't like to feel it. All of us want to be intimate. We want people to know us. And that does take vulnerability.
Absolutely.
So it's almost like we're kind of our own worst enemies here. We want people to know us, but we don't want to feel vulnerable. And you can't have it both ways.
Right. Well, and I love what you said about, we need to hear the other side. And so rather than just focusing in on our own, I'm not being treated right, or I'm being left behind, or I feel like I'm being taken for granted, that pressing in and asking the other person, where are you? What's happening with you?
Yes.
And very often we might find some things that we didn't know. Maybe we thought we knew, but maybe we really don't know.
Absolutely.
So, great insight there. Thank you so much for sharing.
A shout out to Matt, who's in Tomesa, who does it on 9 o'clock, who moderates our Facebook feed. Thank you so much for doing that. Thank you so much for tuning in. Before we get off of here, let's pray. Would you mind praying for us?
God, we do want to say thank you so much for our time together today. We thank you that when we are not able to meet in person, that you have allowed a way for us to still come together, to learn, to be a part of your family, to be together. And so thank you for technology. Thank you for allowing us to stay connected, because we know that is in your heart for us, to stay connected to you and to one another. And we just pray today that you will help us to take to heart about what it looks like when we run in our lives, to help us to do a deep dive into what are the reasons that I run and what do I risk when I run.
That's right.
And most of all, God, to realize that you are constantly running toward us.
That's right.
You run after us day after day because your love for us is beyond what our mind can ever understand. You blow our minds with your faithfulness. You blow our minds with your love. You blow our minds with how you accept us day after day after day. And when we come to you and we say, God, I've messed up here, or I'm struggling here, you are quick to forgive us and to give us a fresh start. So help us to keep our eyes on you first and foremost. Help us to run to you first, to find you as our hiding place and our protection. And then you will help us to thrive in all the other areas of our life when we keep our eyes fixed on you. Thank you for running after us. We love you so much, Lord. Amen.
Thank you, guys, and go be the church.